I was in my wedding dress, minutes away from walking down the aisle, when my dad slipped me a note with 5 words: "Don't go through with it." I was confused and terrified. 30 minutes later, a stranger knocked on my door, and the perfect man I was about to marry was revealed to be a monster. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. My name is Lily, and 6 months ago, I was the happiest woman alive. I had just gotten engaged to Alex Carter, the man of my dreams. Actually, that phrase doesn't do him justice. Alex was beyond what I had ever dreamed possible. He was the kind of man you see in movies and think doesn't exist in real life. I met Alex at a charity gala downtown. I worked in event planning, so I was there for business, making sure everything ran smoothly. He was a guest, a successful architect who had donated a significant amount to the children's hospital we were raising money for that night. I was adjusting the placement cards at one of the tables when I felt someone watching me. I looked up, and there he was. Alex was tall, with dark hair that had just a touch of gray at the temples. His eyes were this warm hazel color that seemed to change in the light. He had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. When he walked over and introduced himself, I actually felt my heart skip a beat. I know how that sounds, but it's true. We talked for maybe 10 minutes that first night. He asked about my work, seemed genuinely interested in what I did. He made me laugh with a story about a disastrous building project where everything that did go wrong. Before he left, he asked for my number. I gave it to him without hesitation. Our first date was 3 days later. He took me to this small Italian restaurant that he said reminded him of a place he'd visited in Rome. The food was incredible, but honestly, I barely tasted it. I was so caught up in our conversation. Alex was smart and funny. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He told me about his work, how he loved creating spaces that made people feel safe and happy. He talked about his childhood, growing up in a small town in Vermont with parents who taught him the value of hard work and kindness. Then, toward the end of dinner, his expression changed. He got quiet for a moment, and I could see him struggling with something. Finally, he said there was something I should know about him. Something important. My stomach dropped. I thought he was going to tell me he was married or had some terrible secret. Instead, he told me about Sarah. Sarah had been his wife. They had married young, both of them just 25. They had been together for 5 years when she was killed in a car accident. A drunk driver had run a red light and hit her car head-on. She died instantly. Alex said it happened 3 years ago, and he was only now starting to feel like he could open his heart again. The way he told me this story, with such raw pain in his eyes, broke my heart. I reached across the table and took his hand. He squeezed it and gave me this sad, grateful smile. He said he wanted to be honest with me from the start because if we were going to see each other, I needed to know why he might seem cautious sometimes, why he might need to take things slow. But we didn't take things slow. Not really. How could we? The connection between us was electric. Within a month, we were seeing each other almost every day. Within 2 months, he'd met my parents. Within 3 months, I knew I was in love with him. Alex fit into my life perfectly. My friends adored him. He would show up to our game nights with expensive wine and terrible puns. He remembered everyone's names and asked about their lives. My best friend Rachel pulled me aside after meeting him the first time and said, "If you don't marry him, I will." My mother fell in love with him immediately. He would bring her flowers when he came over for dinner, always remembering that she loved yellow roses. He asked her about her garden and listened to her talk about her tomato plants like it was the most fascinating subject in the world. He helped her carry groceries and fix the leaky faucet in their kitchen without being asked. But the person whose approval mattered most to me was my father. Dad was a quiet man, a retired mechanic who didn't waste words. He was kind and steady, the kind of father who showed his love through actions rather than speeches. He had taught me to ride a bike, to change a tire, to trust my instincts. He had very high standards for anyone who wanted to be part of our family. The first time Dad met Alex, I was so nervous I felt sick. We had Sunday dinner at my parents' house. Alex showed up early, dressed nicely, but not too formally. He shook my father's hand firmly and looked him in the eye. Then he did something that surprised me. He noticed my dad's vintage Mustang in the garage and asked about it. That car was my father's pride and joy. He had been restoring it for years. Most people didn't even notice it. But Alex walked right over and started asking questions about the engine, the bodywork, the original parts versus the replacements. My dad started talking more than I'd heard him talk in months. They spent an hour in that garage while my mom and I finished cooking. When they came back inside, my dad had this look on his face. It was approval. Real, genuine approval. Over dinner, Alex told the story about Sarah again. My parents listened with such sympathy. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father reached over and put his hand on Alex's shoulder and said, "You've been through a lot, son, but you're strong. I can see that." After that dinner, on our way out to the car, my dad pulled me aside. He hugged me, which he didn't do often, and said quietly, "He's a good man, Lily. A really good man." Coming from my father, that meant everything. The proposal came on a Saturday evening in April. We had gone for a walk in the park near my apartment. It was one of those perfect spring days where everything smells like flowers and fresh grass. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. We were standing by the lake, watching ducks swim past when Alex got quiet. He turned to face me and took both of my hands. He told me that meeting me had brought him back to life. He said that after Sarah died, he thought he would never feel whole again. But I had shown him that love was still possible. That joy was still possible. He said he wanted to spend the rest of his life making me happy. Then he got down on one knee and pulled out a ring. It was beautiful, a simple diamond on a gold band. He asked me to marry him. I said yes. Before he even finished the question, I was crying and laughing at the same time. People walking past clapped and cheered for us. It felt like a scene from a movie. The wedding planning was a whirlwind. We decided on a 6-month engagement. Alex said he didn't want to wait. He had already lost so much time to grief, and he wanted to start our life together as soon as possible. I felt the same way. Why wait when you found the person you're meant to be with? Alex was involved in every detail of the planning. Most grooms don't care about centerpieces or invitation fonts, but Alex cared. He said he wanted our wedding to be perfect because I deserved perfect. He had opinions about the flowers, the music, the menu. At first, I thought it was sweet. He was so excited, so invested. Looking back now, I wonder if he was just playing a role, if every carefully chosen detail was part of his performance. We decided on a venue outside the city, a beautiful old estate with gardens and a big white tent. We chose late October for the date, hoping for autumn colors and cool weather. I found my dress at the third shop I visited. It was ivory lace with a fitted bodice and a flowing skirt. When I put it on, Rachel cried. My mother cried. Even the saleswoman got teary. Alex and I had decided not to do a first look before the ceremony. He wanted the traditional experience of seeing me for the first time as I walked down the aisle. He said he wanted that moment to be magical. I agreed, even though part of me wanted to see him earlier, to have a private moment before all the chaos. My father and I had a different moment planned. A few weeks before the wedding, Dad asked if he could come see me in my dress before the ceremony, just the two of us. Not the traditional first look, but a quiet moment between father and daughter. I said yes immediately. My dad wasn't sentimental often, but when he was, it meant the world. During the final weeks before the wedding, Alex seemed more stressed than usual. He said work was crazy, that he had a big project deadline right before our wedding date. He was distracted sometimes, checking his phone more than normal. A few times I asked if everything was okay, and he always smiled and kissed my forehead and said everything was perfect. He said he was just tired and excited and couldn't wait to marry me. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? In all our time together, he had never given me a reason to doubt him. He was attentive and loving. He called when he said he would. He showed up when he said he would. He remembered the little things, like how I took my coffee or that I hated surprises. He seemed almost too good to be true. My dad noticed the change in Alex, too. About 2 weeks before the wedding, Dad called me and asked if I wanted to grab lunch, just the two of us. We met at a diner near his house, the same place we'd been going since I was a kid. Over burgers and fries, Dad asked me how I was feeling about the wedding. I said I was excited, maybe a little nervous, but mostly just ready. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his eyes I couldn't quite read. Then he asked if Alex was treating me well, if I felt safe and happy. I laughed and said, of course, that Alex was wonderful. Dad nodded and said, good, that's good. Then he told me that no matter what, he would always be there for me, that if I ever needed anything at all, I should call him, day or night. It felt like an odd thing to say 2 weeks before my wedding, but I just squeezed his hand and said, I knew that I loved him. He squeezed back and changed the subject to the Mustang. The wedding day arrived faster than I expected. I woke up that morning in my childhood bedroom, where I'd spent the night before so I could get ready with my mom and bridesmaids. The sun was streaming through the windows. I could hear birds singing outside. It was going to be a beautiful day. My bridesmaids arrived at 9. Rachel, my best friend since college, my cousin Emma, my coworker Jessica. They came in with mimosas and pastries and enough excited energy to power a small city. We blasted music and took silly photos. The hairstylist arrived and started working magic, pinning my hair into an elegant updo with small flowers woven through it. The makeup artist made my eyes look bigger and my skin look flawless. My mom kept crying happy tears. She'd come into the room every few minutes, look at me, and start crying again. She kept saying she couldn't believe her baby girl was getting married. My bridesmaids teased her lovingly and kept handing her tissues. When it was time to put on the dress, they all gathered around me. Rachel carefully lifted it over my head, and Emma zipped it up the back. I turned to look in the full-length mirror, and for a moment, I didn't recognize myself. I looked like a bride, like someone's wife, like the beginning of a whole new chapter. The photographer was snapping pictures constantly, capturing every moment. My bridesmaids in their dusty blue dresses, my mom pinning my veil into my hair, all of us laughing at something Rachel said. It was perfect. Everything was exactly as I had imagined it. My dad was supposed to arrive at 11 for our private moment. At 11 on the dot, there was a soft knock on the door. My mom opened it, and there he was. Dad was wearing his tuxedo, his hair neatly combed, his shoes shined. But it was his face that made me pause. He looked emotional, yes. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite name. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking at me. Then he said, "You look beautiful, sweetheart." His voice was thick with emotion. My mom ushered everyone out, giving us privacy. The door closed, and it was just Dad and me. He walked slowly toward me, his eyes never leaving my face. When he reached me, he gently took my hands. His hands were rough from years of manual work, but his touch was soft. He looked at me like he was memorizing my face. Then he pulled me into a hug. It was a tight hug, the kind that said more than words could. I felt his chest rise and fall with a deep breath. When he pulled back, I saw his eyes were wet. He cupped my face with one hand and said, "I love you more than anything in this world. You know that, right?" I nodded, my own tears threatening to ruin my makeup. "I know, Dad. I love you too." He dropped his hand and seemed to struggle with something. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say more, then closed it again. Finally, he pulled me into another quick hug. As he did, I felt him press something into my palm, something small in paper. His hand was shaking. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Read this alone, please." Then he pulled back, kissed my forehead, and walked toward the door. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, looked back at me one more time, and then left. The whole interaction had maybe lasted 2 minutes, but it felt like everything had shifted. I stood there, frozen, staring at the closed door. In my hand was a small piece of paper, folded several times. My heart was suddenly pounding. Something was wrong. The way Dad had looked at me, the trembling in his hands, the urgency in his voice. The door opened again, and my bridesmaids started to pile back in, chattering and laughing. My mom was right behind them, dabbing at her eyes with the tissue. Rachel asked what Dad had said, if it was emotional. I mumbled something noncommittal and closed my fist tighter around the note. I needed to be alone. I needed to read whatever my father had written. I excused myself to the bathroom, saying I needed a minute to collect myself before we took more photos. Rachel gave me a knowing smile and said to take my time. I locked the bathroom door behind me and leaned against it. My hands were shaking now too as I carefully unfolded the note. The handwriting was my father's, but it was messier than usual, shakier, like his hand had been unsteady as he wrote. The note contained only 5 words. "Don't go through with it." I read it 3 times, sure I was misunderstanding. Don't go through with it. Don't go through with what? The wedding? My father was telling me not to marry Alex. That couldn't be right. Dad loved Alex. He had approved of him, encouraged me, told me Alex was a good man. My mind started racing through possibilities. Was Dad sick? Was he dying and didn't want me to get married because he wouldn't be around to see it? That didn't make sense. He would tell me if he was sick. Was he having some kind of breakdown? Some last-minute father of the bride panic? But my father wasn't the type to panic. He wasn't dramatic or impulsive. He thought things through. If he had written this note, he had a real, serious reason. I tried to take a deep breath, but my chest felt tight. There was a knock on the bathroom door. It was the wedding coordinator, a crisp, professional woman named Margaret. She called through the door that we needed to start heading to the venue soon. The ceremony was starting in an hour, and we needed time for final photos and getting everyone in place. I called back that I needed just a few more minutes. My voice sounded strange, high-pitched and strained. Margaret said, "Okay, but we really couldn't wait long." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called my dad. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. He had turned his phone off. Why would he turn his phone off? I tried again. Same thing, straight to voicemail. I sent him a text. "Dad, what does your note mean? Please call me." I stared at my phone, willing it to ring. Nothing. There was another knock, more insistent this time. Rachel's voice. "Lily, are you okay in there? You're worrying us." I splashed cold water on my face, careful not to ruin my makeup, and tried to calm down. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the note was a mistake or a joke, or something I was misunderstanding. I opened the door. Rachel took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "What happened? Are you feeling sick?" I shook my head. "I'm fine, just nervous." She studied me, not fully believing. But the coordinator was hovering behind her, tapping her watch. "We really need to go. Margaret said firmly. The next 20 minutes were a blur. We packed up all the getting ready supplies. We climbed into the limousine that would take us to the venue. My bridesmaids were chattering excitedly, but their voices sounded far away like I was underwater. My mother was beside me, holding my hand, telling me how proud she was. I nodded and smiled, but inside I was screaming. Don't go through with it. Why? Why would Dad write that? We arrived at the venue, and it was beautiful. The gardens were in full autumn glory, with orange and red leaves creating a canopy of color. The white tent was set up perfectly, with rows of chairs and an aisle down the middle. Flowers were everywhere, in arrangements that had cost a fortune. Guests were already starting to arrive, dressed in their finest. Everything I had planned for months was coming together perfectly. Except my father had told me not to go through with it, and I had no idea why. Margaret ushered us into the bridal suite, a small room in the estate house where I could wait until it was time for the ceremony. My bridesmaids went to take their places. My mom gave me one more teary hug and left to be seated. It was just me and Margaret now. She was going through the timeline, telling me that in about 15 minutes the processional would start. The bridesmaids would walk down the aisle, then the flower girl, then the ring bearer, and then it would be my turn. My father would meet me at the entrance to the tent, and we would walk down the aisle together. My father, who had told me not to do this, who wouldn't answer his phone. I felt like I was going to throw up. I sat down on the small couch in the bridal suite, trying to breathe. Margaret asked if I needed water. I nodded, and she hurried off to get some. I was alone. Finally, truly alone. I pulled out my phone again and tried calling my dad one more time. Straight to voicemail. I tried my mom. No answer. She had probably already turned off her phone for the ceremony. I looked at the note again, now crumpled from being squeezed in my fist. Don't go through with it. 5 words that had turned my perfect day into a nightmare. Margaret came back with water and told me 10 minutes. I drank the water and tried to think. What were my options? I could go through with the wedding. I could walk down that aisle and marry Alex and hope that my father was wrong about whatever had made him write that note. Or I could stop everything. Cancel the wedding, disappoint everyone, humiliate myself and Alex, all based on 5 words. But these weren't just anyone's 5 words. They were my father's. The man who had never steered me wrong. The man who loved me more than anything. Margaret's phone buzzed. She looked at it and frowned. That's odd, she said. What? My voice came out as barely a whisper. The front desk says there are 2 people here who need to speak with you urgently. They're not on the guest list. My heart stopped. Who are they? Margaret was texting back, asking the same question. She read the response. A woman named Elena and an older man. They say it's an emergency? I didn't know anyone named Elena. The name meant nothing to me, but something in my gut told me this was connected to my father's note. It had to be. Send them up, I said. Margaret looked uncertain. But the ceremony starts in 10 minutes. We don't have time for unexpected visitors. Send them up now. My voice was firmer than I felt. Margaret made a quick call, and less than a minute later, there was a knock on the door. She opened it, and 2 people stepped into the bridal suite. A woman, probably in her early 30s, with dark hair and tired eyes, and an older man, maybe 60, with a stern, weathered face. The woman looked at me in my wedding dress, and her expression crumbled. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I stood up, my legs shaky. Who are you? The woman took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was steady despite the tears on her face. My name is Elena Carter. I am Alex's wife. The world tilted. I actually felt dizzy, like the floor had dropped out from under me. That's not possible, I said. Alex's wife died. She died in a car accident. Elena shook her head slowly. I didn't die. I'm right here. The older man stepped forward. My name is Robert Martinez. I'm Elena's father. And I'm the one who contacted your father this morning. This morning. My father had known this morning. That's why he wrote the note. That's why he couldn't look me in the eye. I don't understand, I said. My voice sounded small and far away. Elena wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. Alex and I got married 7 years ago. We were happy at first, or I thought we were. We had a son together. His name is Daniel. He's 5 years old. A son. Alex had a son? A living son he had never mentioned. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It's a disease that affects my nervous system. Some days I'm fine. Other days I can barely walk. It's unpredictable. It's hard. She paused, and I saw the pain in her face. Not just physical pain, but something deeper. When I got sick, Alex changed. He didn't want to deal with a wife who might need help, who might become a burden. He started staying late at work. He stopped coming to my doctor appointments. He became cold and distant. I was shaking my head, not wanting to hear this, but unable to stop listening. Then, about 2.5 years ago, I woke up one morning and he was gone. All his clothes were gone. Half the money in our bank accounts was gone. I tried calling him, but his number was disconnected. I tried finding him at work, but he had quit. He just vanished. He abandoned me and our son without a word. Tears were streaming down my face now, ruining my makeup. This couldn't be true. Not Alex. Not the man who had been so loving, so perfect. Robert, Elena's father, pulled a folder from the bag he was carrying. I'm a retired police detective. When my daughter's husband abandoned her, I started looking for him. It took me 2 years, but I found him. He legally changed his last name from Martinez to Carter. He moved to a new city. He created an entirely new identity. And he told everyone his wife had died, so no one would ask questions. He opened the folder and started pulling out documents. This is our marriage certificate. Here's Daniel's birth certificate showing Alex as the father. Here are photos of them together. Here are medical records showing Elena's diagnosis. And here's the court order we filed yesterday trying to locate him for child support and spousal abandonment. He spread the documents on the coffee table in front of me. Even through my tears, I could see they were real. Official documents with seals and signatures. Photos of Alex looking younger, but unmistakably him. Holding a baby, standing next to Elena on their wedding day. How did you find him? I heard myself ask. Your wedding announcement was posted online by the venue. It included his full name and photo. A friend of mine from the force saw it and recognized him from the search I'd been running. He called me 2 days ago. I immediately got in touch with your father because I knew we were running out of time. My father. He had known for 2 days. He had carried this information, this horrible truth, trying to figure out how to tell me. And in the end, he had distilled it down to 5 words. Why didn't he tell me sooner? I asked, though I was asking myself as much as them. Robert's expression softened. He wanted to, but I advised him to wait until we had concrete proof, until we could be here in person. Your father was torn apart by this. He wanted to protect you, but he also didn't want to ruin your wedding day based on accusations. He's a good man. He did the right thing. Margaret, who had been standing frozen by the door this whole time, finally spoke. Ms. Hayes, the ceremony is supposed to start in 5 minutes. What do you want me to do? I looked down at the documents spread before me. At Elena, standing with such dignity despite the pain I could see in her eyes. At Robert, who had spent 2 years tracking down the man who had abandoned his daughter. Then I looked down at myself, at this expensive white dress, at the flowers in my hair, at the ring on my finger that Alex had given me while lying through his teeth. A strange calm settled over me. The panic, the confusion, the desperate hope that this was all a misunderstanding, it all fell away. In its place was a cold, clear certainty. "Tell everyone the ceremony is delayed," I said to Margaret. "I need 10 minutes." She nodded and hurried out, already pulling out her phone. I turned to Elena. "Where is your son now?" "With my mother," she said quietly. "I didn't want to bring him here. This is already traumatic enough." "What do you need from me?" She looked surprised by the question. "Nothing. I just needed to warn you, to stop you from making the biggest mistake of your life. Alex is not who he pretends to be. He's selfish and cruel. He will be wonderful to you as long as you're healthy and useful and you make his life better. But the moment you need him, the moment you become inconvenient, he will disappear." I nodded slowly. "Thank you for coming. I know this must have been incredibly difficult." Elena stepped forward and took my hands. "You deserve better. You deserve someone who will stand by you no matter what. Don't settle for anything less." We stood there for a moment, two women connected by the same man's betrayal. And then Elena and her father left. The door closed softly behind them. I was alone in the bridal suite, surrounded by the evidence of Alex's lies. I should have been walking down the aisle. Instead, I was staring at photos of his secret family. There was a soft knock, and my father entered. He must have been waiting nearby. His face was gray with worry and grief. "Lily," he said, and his voice broke. I held up my hand. "You did the right thing, Dad." He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled me into his arms. I collapsed against him, and the tears came. Not delicate, pretty tears, huge, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. My father held me tight and let me cry. When I finally calmed down enough to breathe, I pulled back and looked at him. "I need you to get everyone out of the tent. Tell them the wedding is off. You don't have to explain why. Just get them out." "What about Alex?" Dad asked, his jaw tight. "I'll handle Alex." Dad looked like he wanted to argue, to protect me from one more painful thing. But he saw something in my face that stopped him. He nodded. "I'll take care of it." He laughed, and I took a moment to look in the mirror. My makeup was destroyed, black streaks of mascara running down my face. My eyes were red and swollen. I looked like someone who had just had their heart ripped out, which I suppose was accurate. I took a tissue and wiped away the worst of the damage. I wasn't going to fix it. I didn't need to look pretty for what came next. I walked out of the bridal suite and down the hallway. The estate had a small study where the groom was supposed to wait before the ceremony. Alex would be in there, probably checking his watch, wondering why things were running late. I opened the door without knocking. Alex was standing by the window, looking out at the garden. He was wearing his tuxedo, and I had to admit, he looked handsome. But now, knowing what I knew, I could see the costume for what it was. He turned when he heard the door and smiled. "There you are." I was starting to wonder if you'd gotten cold feet. He laughed at his own joke, then stopped when he saw my face. "Lily? What's wrong? Have you been crying?" I closed the door behind me and stood there, looking at this stranger wearing my fiancé's face. "Elena is here," I said quietly. I watched the transformation happen in real time. The warm, concerned expression vanished. His face went completely blank, and his eyes I had thought were so kind, turned flat and cold. It lasted only a second before he rearranged his features into confusion. "Elena? I don't know anyone named Elena. What are you talking about?" "Your wife, Elena Carter. Or, I guess Elena Martinez, since you changed your name." My voice was steady. I felt eerily calm. Alex's face paled. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I watched him calculate, trying to figure out what story might still work. What lie might save him? "Lily, I can explain, he started. Don't? The word came out sharp and hard. Don't lie to me anymore. I have seen the marriage certificate. I've seen photos of you with your son. I know everything. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact second he decided to stop pretending. His whole posture changed. The warmth, the charm, it all fell away. What was left looked at me with cold calculation. So, what happens now? He asked, and his voice was different too. Flatter, less emotional. Now you leave out of this venue, and you don't contact me ever again. He laughed, actually laughed. Just like that? You're not even going to hear my side? You abandoned your sick wife and young child. You stole money and changed your identity and lied to everyone you met, including me. What possible side could you have that would make any of that okay? Alex's face hardened. You have no idea what it was like. Elena got sick, and suddenly my whole life was about doctor appointments and medications and never knowing if she'd be able to walk that day. I didn't sign up for that. I married a healthy woman, not an invalid. The cruelty in his words took my breath away. This was who he really was. Not the charming, attentive man who had proposed by the lake. This cold, selfish person who saw other people as props in his life. Get out, I said. You're making a mistake, he said. But he was already moving toward the door. You think you're better than me? You're not. Everyone's selfish. I'm just honest about it. You're not honest about anything. I stepped aside to let him pass. And stay away from Elena and your son. She's filed legal papers. If you run again, they'll find you. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe. Then he was gone, pushing past me and striding down the hallway. I stood in the empty study, shaking. I had done it. I had confronted him and sent him away, but it didn't feel victorious. It just felt hollow and sad. I walked slowly back toward the main part of the estate. Through the windows, I could see the tent. My father was at the front, speaking to the assembled guests. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but people were standing, gathering their things, murmuring to each other. Some looked shocked. Some looked concerned. My mother appeared at my side, moving faster than I'd ever seen her move. She pulled me into a crushing hug. Oh, my baby girl. She was crying, and I started crying again, too. The rest of the evening was a blur of activity that felt surreal. My bridesmaids surrounded me, asking what had happened, what they could do. I gave them the shortest version I could manage. Alex had lied about who he was, and the wedding was off. Rachel took charge, her event planning instincts kicking in. She called the caterer and told them to pack everything up. She spoke to the band and the photographer. She handled the logistics while I sat in the bridal suite, still in my wedding dress, feeling numb. My parents stayed close. My father sat next to me on the couch, not saying anything, just being there. My mother brought me water and tissues and kept smoothing my hair like she had when I was a little girl. Guests filtered out, most looking confused and worried. A few close family members came to the bridal suite to check on me. My aunt cried and said she had never liked Alex, which made me laugh in spite of everything. My grandmother held my face in her soft, wrinkled hands and told me I was strong and would get through this. As the sun set and the estate slowly emptied, the full weight of what had happened started to sink in. The man I loved didn't exist. The life I had planned was gone. The future I had imagined had been built entirely on lies. But I was also overwhelmed with gratitude. Gratitude Elena had been brave enough to come here and tell me the truth. Gratitude that her father had spent 2 years searching. Gratitude that my father had loved me enough to risk my anger and unhappiness to save me from a terrible mistake. Hours later, after everyone had finally left, I sat with my dad in the now quiet bridal suite. I changed out of my wedding dress and into comfortable clothes my mom had brought. The dress was hanging on the back of the door, a beautiful, expensive ghost of what should have been. I'm sorry, sweetheart, Dad said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken in over an hour. For what? You saved me. I should have told you sooner. When Robert first called me, I should have come to you right away. I shook my head. If you had just told me, I might not have believed you. I might have defended Alex. I might have convinced myself you were wrong. Seeing Elena, hearing her story, seeing the proof, that was what I needed. I was so scared, Dad admitted, and I'd never heard him sound like that before. Vulnerable, scared you'd go through with it before Robert and Elena could get here, scared you'd hate me for ruining your wedding day, scared I was making the wrong call. I took his hand, his rough, calloused hand that had built things and fixed things and held me when I cried as a child. You made the right call. You wrote me that note so I would have the power to decide. Even though you were terrified, you gave me the choice. Would you have stopped the wedding if Elena hadn't come? I thought about that. I don't know. Maybe. Your note was like a crack in the perfect picture. Once I saw it, I couldn't stop seeing all the little things that didn't quite add up. The way Alex was so controlling about the wedding planning, how he always had an answer for everything, how his past was sad but conveniently unverifiable. We sat in silence for a while. Then Dad said, when I first met Alex, I liked him. I really did. But about a month ago, something started bothering me. I couldn't put my finger on it. Just a feeling that something was off. When Robert called and told me the truth, it all clicked into place. Trust your instincts, I said, echoing words he had told me my whole life. Always, he agreed. My mother came in, carrying mugs of tea. She handed one to each of us and sat down on my other side. We sat there together, the three of us, drinking tea in a bridal suite that would never be used for its intended purpose. What do I do now? I asked, not really expecting an answer. Now you heal, Mom said gently. You take time to process this. You lean on people who love you, and eventually you move forward. But how do I trust anyone again? How do I believe anything anyone tells me? Dad set down his tea and turned to face me. Lily, what Alex did to you and to Elena, that's about who he is. Not about who you are. You're not naive or stupid for believing him. He's a con artist, a professional liar. He fooled everyone, not just you. Your father's right, Mom added. Alex showed us all exactly what we wanted to see. That's what manipulators do. But that doesn't mean everyone is like that. Most people are genuine. Most people are good. I wanted to believe them, but right now, sitting in the wreckage of my almost wedding, it was hard to imagine ever trusting that completely again. Over the next few days, I slowly started picking up the pieces. I moved out of the apartment I had shared with Alex. Thankfully, the lease was only in my name. I packed up his things and left them on the curb. I changed all my passwords and blocked his number, though he never tried to call. I met with Elena one more time, at a coffee shop downtown. She brought her son, Daniel. He was a beautiful little boy with Alex's hazel eyes, but a sweeter expression. While he colored at the table, Elena and I talked. She told me more about her marriage, about the slow erosion of Alex's kindness once she got sick. She told me about the struggle of being abandoned, of having to move back in with her parents, of fighting every day with an unpredictable illness while also trying to care for a young child. Do you hate him? I asked. She thought about that. Sometimes, but mostly I just feel sad. Sad he chose to run instead of stay. Sad that Daniel will grow up knowing his father abandoned him. Sad that I wasted years loving someone who was incapable of loving me back. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I'm sorry for what he did to you and Daniel. It's not your fault, she said firmly. You're as much his victim as I am. Actually, you're luckier. You found out before you married him, before you had children with him, before you tied your life to his legally and financially. She was right. As painful as this was, it would have been so much worse if I had married Alex. If I had years of my life invested, if we had children together. Before we parted, Elena gave me a tight hug. Thank you for believing me, for not defending him or making excuses for him. Thank you for being kind. Thank you for being brave enough to show up on my wedding day, I replied. Telling friends and extended family what had happened was exhausting. Some people were shocked. Some admitted they'd had doubts about Alex, but hadn't wanted to say anything. A few people I thought were friends, implied that I must have missed red flags, that I should have known. Those friendships didn't survive. But most people were supportive and kind. Rachel came over nearly every day for the first 2 weeks. She brought food and wine and sat with me while I cried or raged or sat in numb silence. She never told me to move on or look on the bright side. She just sat with me in the pain. Work was understanding. My boss told me to take all the time I needed. When I did come back, my coworkers were supportive without being intrusive. They followed my lead, talking about it when I wanted to, and dropping it when I didn't. The hardest part was grieving someone who had never really existed. I wasn't mourning Alex, the cruel man who had abandoned his sick wife. I was mourning the Alex I thought I knew, the kind, attentive, loving man who had proposed by the lake and planned our perfect wedding. That man had never been real, but my love for him had been. My dreams of our future had been. And I had to mourn those. Therapy helped. I found a counselor who specialized in trauma and betrayal. She helped me understand that what I'd experienced was a form of emotional abuse, that Alex had love-bombed me, created a false persona, and manipulated everyone around him. She helped me see that healing would take time, and that was okay. 3 months after the wedding that didn't happen, I was doing better. I wasn't healed, not completely, but I was moving forward. I had learned to trust my instincts again. I had learned to set better boundaries. I had learned that being cautious wasn't the same as being closed off. And most importantly, I had learned the difference between performative love and real love. Alex's love had been grand gestures and perfect words and carefully curated moments. My father's love had been a shaky note with 5 words, written with a trembling hand, risking my anger to save me from disaster. Real love wasn't always pretty or comfortable. Sometimes it was hard and messy. Sometimes it meant doing something that might hurt someone in the short term to protect them in the long term. My father had shown me what real love looked like. He had saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. He had trusted me with the truth. Even though it shattered my happiness, he had stood by me through the aftermath, steady and present. One evening, I went over to my parents' house for dinner. It was just the 3 of us, eating my mom's lasagna and talking about ordinary things. After dinner, Dad and I went out to the garage to look at the Mustang. He'd finally finished restoring it. We stood there, admiring his work, and I said, "Thank you, Dad, for everything." He looked at me, and I saw the relief in his eyes. He had been carrying guilt about the wedding, about the note, about all of it. "You don't have to thank me for loving you, sweetheart. That's just what fathers do." "Not all fathers," I said, thinking of Daniel growing up without his dad. "Not Alex." Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "No, not all fathers, but good men, real men. They show up. They stay. They do the hard things because it's right, not because it's easy." We stood there in comfortable silence, and I felt a deep sense of peace. My life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned. My perfect wedding had become a disaster. My fairy tale romance had been revealed as a nightmare. But I was okay. I was surrounded by people who loved me truly and deeply. I had dodged a lifetime of lies and disappointment. And I had learned what real love looked like. Some people might say my father should have told me about Alex sooner, that he should have confronted me days before the wedding, given me more time to process. But I think he did it perfectly. He gave me the information I needed exactly when I needed it. He trusted me to make the right choice. He had my back. My dad saved me from a monster on my wedding day with a 5-word note and a father's protective love. I will be grateful for that for the rest of my life. What do you think? Should he have told me sooner, or did he handle it the right way? Let me know in the comments below.